is important that we begin to pay serious attention to the study of the works of African descent scholars, several of whom were political activists and whose life stories teach us crucial lessons in attaining freedom and self-rehabilitation. Amilcar Cabral, before he wrote Revolution in Guinea and Cape Verde, taught the whole of Guinea as an agronomist. Cabral, far ahead of many of Africa's teacher revolutionaries, was therefore very well grounded in the sociology, history, and culture of his people. No wonder then that he was able to lead a successful revolution against the Portuguese until he was assassinated. Mentioning Cabral reminds me of Patrice Lumumba, another African leader who was assassinated by Western forces seeking to kill the African dream for self-emancipation. Let me proceed to use the example of Lumumba. And one might include here even Thomas Sankara and more recently Muammar al-Gaddafi as a leader whose life story necessitates a complete and thorough reappraisal of the review of the way in which we engage as educators and scholars and intellectuals with the notion of Western democracy and the manner in which it unfolds, even in our present time. Our very existence at the socioeconomic, political, and cultural levels have come to be determined and regulated by this concept, this phenomenon, so much so that naturally Western democracy, that is within our curricula one of the most definitive subjects, cutting as it does across many disciplines. But then, the provocative question that I want to pose today is, have we very deeply scrutinized its merits and demerits for Africa and for Africans? I very much doubt that we have. And I think it is very highly problematic the way and manner in which it has been imposed on us and how it has evolved and worked. For me personally, and as far as I can see, for the majority of our citizens and peoples, it is a phenomenon that we need to take a more careful look at. The story of Patrice Lumumba and the Belgian Congo is deeply illustrative of the point I want to make. The testimony of Ghanaian writer Ayi Kweyama, taken from his work, The Eloquence of the Scribes, a memoir on the sources and resources of African literature, is instructive in this regard. And I'm quoting briefly from this work in a chapter called Lumumba, African Dream, European Nightmare. The problem Lumumba faced right from the start was that European and American corporations and the governments serving them were determined to use every means, murder included, to prevent any African committed to African as opposed to European control of African resources for the achievement of African prosperity from ever attaining power. Much was expected to depend on the outcome of the first colony-wide elections in the Congo. It was clear that Lumumba lacked the kind of official Belgian and foreign patronage that could facilitate electoral campaigning. Because the so-called moderate Africans, those who could be trusted to continue placing European interests above African human rights, were heavily backed by money and administrative influence, while Lumumba had to work with what little material support he could glean from an impoverished, if numerous, constituency, the moderates were expected to beat him. So there was considerable consternation and surprise all around among European and American officials when Lumumba won the first democratic elections in the battered territory. Democratically elected or not, it became clear that the charismatic leader was not going to be allowed to implement his program of African equality, education, health, and prosperity. In the end, he was assassinated through the efforts of security and police services from Belgium, France, Britain, and America. The one African in the Congo who showed a clear promise of mobilizing a democratic electorate behind a program of peaceful and equitable social change was murdered by countries ceaselessly trumpeting their self-proclaimed democratic virtues. They killed the one African politician who was committed to getting all African children into schools and universities, ensuring adequate health care for all, and using the resources of the Congo to generate the world that would make such a vast program of human improvement feasible. Now, if we look critically at the situation of Africa today, especially with our so-called underdeveloped and third world status, how come it does not seem to occur to us at all to question the phenomenon of Western democracy as it has been institutionalized? In Africa, in our work as educators, particularly from an angle similar to that which I'm pursuing here, and particularly if we consider that most of Africa's progressively minded leaders have at different times in our social and political history suffered fates similar to Lumumba. Here one can mention Thomas Sankara of Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso and Muammar al-Gaddafi of Libya. And prior to them, the likes of Amilcar Cabral of Guinea and Cape Verde and Steve Biko of South Africa, who were all eliminated. How come we have not, within our educational practice, raised issues about the real value of Western democracy for our peoples? And let me be very clear here what I mean. To have a group of largely Western educated elites, mainly products of a neo-colonial Western educational system, provide alternative and rotating government and leadership to Africa and Africans is not, in my view, any way democratic. I'm saying that that process of ballot changing and changing this to that, etc., is not in and of itself inherently democratic. We have to look at the end product of that process. We must ask ourselves simply the question, why it is that governments are changed every 4 years or 8 years since independence, leaving aside the era of military rule, but that our stagnated and arrested development remains basically the same. It matters not whether particular political parties and their leaders are seen at different points within our electoral and voting systems to have performed relatively better than others. This is not the point at all. What we really have to be looking at here and scrutinizing and dealing with as academics, scholars, and intellectuals, teachers who pass down knowledge to students who then in turn sometimes become teachers, is the fact, and I say the fact very boldly and confidently, that Western democracy, as far as I've witnessed it and experienced it in my lifetime, has been detrimental and destructive to our people. All of the major achievements and benefits of this phenomenon, taking the sociocultural and political history of Ghana into consideration, are, in my view, restricted to a very teeny-weeny, tiny minority of educated elites and their relatives and acolytes and acquaintances. In Ghana, for example, we have changed governments over the years since independence, but I'm sure most of us will agree with me that when we look around us, there is a lot of sterility and stagnation. Whether it is the filth that surrounds us, the poor drainage systems that cause floods and the loss of lives, the indisciplined and unsupervised putting up of buildings and other structures in illegitimate places, whether it is the phenomenon of sikedie basa 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 basa, to borrow the opposite and now immortalized because proven words of fireman Country Songo, Oja, which happens and occurs not only within our sports and has been responsible for its decline, but occurs at almost every level of our sociocultural and political fabric. Whether it is the fact that parents and guardians and relatives spend huge amounts on educating their wards to the university level, but these wards fail to get jobs afterwards. Whether it is the fact that our legal and judicial systems operate obsolete, antiquated, colonial, anti-human rights laws that enable someone who smokes weed or marijuana or a petty time thief to spend 5 or 10 years in prison without trial, while a crooked politician and people in positions of trust and power steal and embezzle millions of dollars and cedis from our people and go scot-free. Whether or not we have a system where parliamentarians on different sides of the political divide can come together under a system called Western democracy and pass laws and policies that facilitate them with monies for expensive cars, while the very roads on which these cars are driven remain in a terrible state and sometimes constitute death traps, even as our hospitals lack basic resources such as ambulances or beds, which then subsequently lead to preventable deaths, especially for the poor, etc., etc. Whether it is this or that, I think we have arrived at that point in our history when our courses and curricula, instead of simply glorifying or validating the virtues of this or that foreign philosophy or cultural or economic system, or elaborating the value of this or that Western approach to doing things, we have come to the point in our troubled history where we need to pose and deal with the harsh, concrete problems of a traumatized existence. Another way of putting it is that we have arrived at that moment in history where everything that we design and teach at all levels of our education, as much as we can, must be directly related to how we can evaluate and critique and find solutions to the problems we have. We have reached that stage, so to speak, where our need for a rehabilitative curricula is most pressing. I'm not talking about producing yet other levels of economic or social or political theory. For the sake of it, I'm referring to how we can unearth and excavate steady paradigms and narratives that open the eyes of our people to the rot and degradation and suffering around us. It would seem to be a near impractical task. Not because it is inherently impossible to transform our university system and our society and be more creatively and progressively oriented as far as the relationship between our work and our society is concerned. It is made more challenging and more difficult largely as a result of human obstacles in our path. In Ayi Kweyameh's novel of 1969 Fragments, the protagonist, Baako, returns from his studies abroad with a firm desire and resolve to contribute to national development. Baako has a vision to help rebuild Ghana, and with his creative vision and his talent and skill as an artist, Baako is presented as a very conscientious citizen, a man interested in improving the status of his country, which has suffered years of post-independent and neo-colonial disorder. In the words of his former school teacher from Achimota, Mr. Okran, Baako is a very capable man who is qualified for a position in the Ghanaian civil service. Yet, this energetic and dynamically creative young man is frustrated and his application unnecessarily delayed when he applies for a job. When Baako and Okran visit one of the big men in Ghana, who through our whom you know culture can help Baako get the job he needs, and Okran laments and complains about the painful and frustrating experiences that Baako has suffered. The big man, described in the novel as the principal secretary, in response to their complaints, tells them directly, all this is beside the point. And then adds, I'm quoting from Ama's novel of 1969, we don't have modern systems here. This country doesn't work that way. If you come back thinking you can make things work in any smooth, efficient way, you just get a complete waste of your time, and it's not worth bothering about. Unfortunately, the young man will also be finding out that making a go of life means forgetting all the beautiful stuff they teach in the classroom. It is very different the way things really work. In anger and driving furiously back home from the appointment with the principal secretary, Okran fumes. You heard him. You're supposed to forget everything good you ever learned. It's all nothing to him and to the others like him. You'll be agreeing with him all too soon. I hate these stupid Ghanaian big shots. They know things don't work, but they are happy to sit on top of the mess all the time. Now he feels he's done us a great favor, and that's the way he wants it. You're expected to be grateful. The machinery doesn't work, except as a special favor for special cases. But they know what they are doing in the long run. You know, Baako, what you're getting here is not a chance to do any useful work. End of quotation. It is significant to note that these are statements about Ghana made in a novel published in 1969, but any honest Ghanaian with open ears and eyes will tell you that this portrait of the Ghanaian system is very largely true as of Ghana of 25th July, 11 a.m. 2018. All of this provides further reason why it is time we became more intellectually creative and adventurous and designed and taught courses that directly address the problems and issues that we face as a people. This is the kind of consciousness that we must seek to generate among our students and our people. The space of the university needs to be transformed from one that simply celebrates old, obsolete, unworkable systems to properly incorporate a problem-solving approach. It is high time we stopped paying obeisance and alliance and constantly genuflecting to Western thinkers and writers. Even our political discourse is full of that kind of intellectual groveling and ideological subservience. Someone talking about African development is more likely to mention to you and cite for you some Western professor, when right here we have works such as Africa Must Unite, and let me make this point very clear. We should also shed that crudely crass, intellectually hypocritical, counterproductive, and highly unprogressive attitude, where we will not teach or cite Nkrumah's Africa Must Unite or his neocolonialism because as students or teacher scholars, we belong to a different political tradition. Nkrumah may be faulted for his introduction of the PDA, which put Dankwa in prison and led to his death, and we may also accost him for his one-party state system he attempted to foist on us. However, none of these detract from the fact that he had wonderful insights based on lived experience for the African Revolution and for African developmental economics that are important for us. The same applies to the work of that other great intellectual giant, perhaps Ghana's greatest ever in the present time, J.B. Dankwa. Whatever we may think of Dankwa and whatever we may not like about him, we should not fail to refuse to tap the great wisdom in his many works. In other words, we should take the best of our intellectual ancestors and combine them for our contemporary benefit and progress. In Life and Lessons, Marcus Garvey, one of Africa and the Black world's most important human rights agitator, activists, and philosophers, makes the following observation. I'm quoting Garvey. We must canonize our own saints, create our own martyrs, and elevate to positions of fame and honor black men and women who have made their distinct contributions to our racial history. Sojourner Truth is worthy of a place of sainthood alongside Joan of Arc. Crispus Attucks and George William Gordon are entitled to the halo of martyrdom with no less glory than the martyrs of any other race. Toussaint Louverture's brilliancy as a soldier and statesman outshone that of Cromwell and Napoleon and Washington. Hence, he is entitled to the highest place as a hero among men. Africa has produced countless men and women in war and peace whose luster and bravery outshine that of any other people. Thus, why do we not see the good and perfection in them? This is one philosophical and intellectual model that we must aspire to. To complement Garvey's statement above, I would add that Yasantua is as much a revolutionary as Joan of Arc. Queen Amina of Zazao and Queen Nzinga of Angola, the amazing queens of Benin and Dahomey, and the Igbo women who fought the Aba Women's War against the British colonialists, deliberately misrepresented by colonial writers as Aba Women's Riots. All of these women, these powerful writers and historical actors and agents of change and transformation, who at different points in our historical life were able to stand up, speak for, and fight for us as African people. Queen Nani of the Cro-Mantains and the Maroons in Jamaica, who was born in Ghana, and Priestess Queen Nyabingi, nicknamed the Lioness of Uganda, etc., are more important for the African child than Queen Victoria or Queen Elizabeth. Or Marie Antoinette of France. Our philosophy courses should be full of the works of the likes of Théophile Obenga and W.E.B. Du Bois and J.B. Dankwa. When we teach democracy and freedom, we should be referencing Queen Nzinga of Angola or Aminau of Zazao and highlighting their historic achievements. We should be drawing the attention of our students to C.L.R. James's The Black Jacobins, to Toussaint Louverture and the San Dominico Revolution. Published as far back as 1938, a story that celebrates one of the first, if not the very first, of the successful revolutions by black people in the Western Hemisphere. Within literature and African cultural studies, a novel such as the African-American writer Toni Morrison's Beloved, which is about slavery, potentially teaches the African child more about slavery than officially whitewashed accounts by Caucasian authors. Malcolm X, having lived and suffered racism in America, wrote and philosophized on race and racism, presented many authoritative statements on social reform. The autobiography of Malcolm X, introduced to my 1990 English undergraduate class by Professor Ann Adams of Cornell University in a course on African American literature, was a real eye-opener. Subsequently, it led to me following and discovering more. Malcolm X should be compulsory reading in our sociology and politics classes. So too should Marcus Garvey, already cited, whose chapters, the slave trade and other chapters, and the Negro's place in world reorganization, in his monumentally classic work, The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, or Africa for the Africans, are essential readings for any serious students of African history. Indeed, that entire study should be approached with the zealousness and devotion with which our people approach the study of the Bible. W.E.B. Du Bois, a great sociologist, is not an author you are likely to find on sociology courses in African universities. Du Bois, famous author of The Souls of Black Folk, published as far back as 1903, is the greatest sociologist of all time. Du Bois produced such works as The Philadelphia Negro, was an activist and human rights agitator. The World in Africa, an inquiry into the part which Africa has played in world history, is a brilliant work on international relations, politics, and race relations. Yet you can be sure that this work by him, or his Black Reconstruction in America, and The Sociology of the Black Man, will hardly be found as reading material on our sociology course lists. Instead, we are more likely to read about European authors like Durkheim, whatever his name is, and Max Weber, when it comes to sociology. Weber. Okay, whatever. I don't even want to know how to pronounce it correctly. Max Weber. I hear the Germans make WV. That's why I made it Max Weber. Weber. Okay, so then I was right, but it's always good to be corrected. Nonetheless. Okay, so, but these people are not directly relevant to us. I mean, the Weber section. Nnamdi Azikiwe with his numerous studies on nationalism and Pan-Africanism and the African Revolution. F.K. Fiawo with his Fifth Landing Stage. Efua Theodora Sutherland with a socially insightful place, Foriwa 1962, Edufa 1967, and The Marriage of Anansiwa 1975. Ama Tedu with the culturally rich and profound play dramas, Anoa and The Dilemma of a Ghost. and indeed her entire literary corpus, and J.B. Dankwa with his several disquisitions on culture and religion and philosophy and politics and nation building, such as his historic, I'm quoting Dankwa's books now, the historic speeches and writings on Ghana, or his equally illustrative and instructive, as determined by its very title, The Ghanaian Establishment, Its Constitution, Its Detentions, Its Traditions, Its Justice and Statecraft, and Its Heritage of Ghanaianism, edited by the late Venerable Professor Albert Odubuahin. John Mensah Saba with his Fanti Constitution, and J.E. Kesley Herford with his deeply philosophical novel, Ethiopia Unbound of 1911. A powerful narrative of African emancipation, published long before the much more celebrated Things Fall Apart of 1958 by Nigeria's Chinua Achebe, and set partially in London, where you have the Fanti Ghanaian African protagonist character, Kwamankra, taking on Western philosophy and philosophers and proving the validity and the wisdom of inherent in African philosophical perspectives. These and many more from our rich intellectual traditions are the kinds of writers whose work must be recuperated, retrieved, and disseminated within the minds of our students. And this should be done in a cross-disciplinary manner, so that Amar Teju's brilliant works are not taught only as part of a literature course, but can find themselves well and adequately represented in history courses, for example. Let me make it once again clear that I am not suggesting at all that we are doing nothing. Hence, I'm not making these statements from an intellectually supercilious position. And I appeal you to don't ask me to explain what supercilious means, because you're likely to do that. Now, let me conclude with the topic of religion. With our very deeply anemic spirituality, with our seeming inability to make a difference between the need to acknowledge and respect and maybe even celebrate the fact that we have a maker or makers, and the pure religious bocosness and zealousness that we seem to have embraced. Long before any Obronin came to Africa to preach to our Nanankansuanum as missionaries, we had an idea of God, or at the very least of a supreme being. It would seem, however, judging from the available evidence, that within our religious dispensation, Western religious structures have been superimposed on Africans who have generally not questioned or challenged them, but taken them at face value. This has led to us embracing religion, and I'm addressing certain versions of Christianity here, with a certain fundamentalist fervor and fanaticism. I think that this involves a very unconscious and uncritical ingestion of religion that we mistake for spirituality. Let me illustrate with a quotation from Achebe's world-famous and world-historic novel, Things Fall Apart, where an encounter between the indigenous Igbo and the invading Christians highlights what may be described as a crisis of soul and identity. I'm quoting now from Achebe. I'm quoting from this one, but I typed it out here. When they had all gathered, of course, you can see this is a massacred version. I can hear the murmuring. When they had all gathered, the white man began to speak to them. He spoke through an interpreter who was an Igbo man, though his dialect was different and harsh to the ears of Mbanta. Many people laughed at his dialect and the way he used the words strangely. Instead of saying myself, he always said my buttocks. But he was a man of commanding presence, and the clansmen listened to him. He said he was one of them, as they could see from his color and his language. The other 4 black men were also his brothers, although one of them did not speak Igbo. The white man was also their brother because they were all sons of God, and he told them about the new God, this new God, the creator of the world and all the men and women. He told them that they worshipped false gods, gods of wood and stone. A deep murmur went through the crowd when he said this. He told them that the true God lived on high, and that all men, when they died, went before him for judgment. Evil men and all the heathen who in their blindness bowed to wood and stone were thrown into fire that burned like palm oil. But good men who worshipped the true God, the new God, the white God, live forever in his happy kingdom. We have been sent by this great God to ask you to leave your wicked ways and false gods and turn to him so that you may be saved when you die, he said. And that ends the quotation. I ask here today, even as we reappraise the manner in which we learn and teach, where is our Chukwu as a response to this statement which seeks to reduce pre-colonial and so-called African traditional religions to the worship of false gods and gods of wood and stone within the discourses of religion and spiritual development? Indeed, is Chukwu the supreme being and creator of the universe within Igbo cosmology, not the same one who also created all men and women and things under the earth and the sun? Is it not for that very reason that the Igbo conceptualized and described Chukwu as Chukwudigbo, which translates literally into English as the God who has always existed or the God who has always been? If this is the case, why have we allowed ourselves to be spiritually coerced into thinking when we worship Chukwu that we are worshiping a false God? Indeed, our Olodumare, the supreme being in Yoruba belief, or Oboade, the most high being and creator and ruler of heaven and earth, the descriptor for God among the Akan folk of Ghana, not similar to the Igbo Chukwu. Are all three gods not equivalent to the Western God who is described in the extract that I have read from Things Fall Apart as the new God, the creator of the world and of all men and women? And so on and so forth, we said and we say in Akan. Indeed, our forebears developed the philosophical saying, no one teaches a child God, etc., etc. All of which simple but deep sayings were developed out of our interactions with our Maker and in tune with our environment. In Ewe, the Supreme Being is referred to as Mauso Bolisa, and in Ga, we have the name Ata Na Nyongmo. In fact, African appreciation of religion and spirituality and belief in a higher being was so far advanced in certain areas and cultures as to democratize even the notion of creation. So that the Ga Ata Na Nyongmo actually conceptualizes the God force as both female and male, thus ensuring, even within the Ga and by extension other African religious dispensations, that the idea that we humans were created by both a superior female and male force. The same notion of a balanced gender God power force extends into the ever cosmological rendition of God. But these days, what do we have? An overzealous and sometimes misleading overfocus on the Christ figure to the detriment of our own image of God. I'm not suggesting, and let me also make a caveat here, I'm not an atheist, and I'm not an agnostic. I believe in a supreme being, but African version. I'm not suggesting that we forget completely about about Yesu Christo or Yeshua the Christ. But if you went deep into African history, you would realize that we already even had the figure of a rising savior, Osiris rising, in ancient Egyptian mythology. Osiris was a Christ-like figure who preceded the notion of Jesus as the resurrected Messiah that we have today. But we do not see the connection between these hard, deeply researched facts and our elevated spirituality. And I was actually going to bring in some, material from some research that goes back to our history. But this subject, when you touch on it, and when you go too deep, it's a very thin, hazy line between what you're trying to say and how you can get your people to understand what you want to say, because some people can become totally alienated if you approach it a certain way. So I decided to hold back a bit on that aspect of it. So we do not see the connection between these hard, deeply researched historical facts and our elevated spirituality, an overdose of prayer and cacophonic noise in all parts of the society, with very little innovative and creatively derived transformative action based on our relationship with our maker or makers, such as when our ancestors were able to develop all these philosophies in communion with our maker. These days we've lost that totally, and it's just one-sided, a particular direction in which we've been led by the Western missionary, and that's totally different. And I think that this is counterproductive and detrimental to us. Our pastors are getting richer and richer, while we, the congregation, are getting poorer and poorer and being asked to wait on God for a miracle. We should be addressing even this anomalous and spiritually counterproductive state of affairs within our educational and socializing practices. But even more to the point is that fundamentally and first of all, we are praying to a God that does not look like us. And so if the same person who took your ancestors into slavery and dehumanized and brutalized you is asking you to pray to his God and is giving you an economic and a political and a cultural system that was designed to make you simply a hewer of wood and a drawer of water, why the hell do you think that that person's economic, political, and religious system can liberate you? That is a question I leave with you. But before you attempt to answer me, I want to end with the emphatic statement that we are in the state in which we are because we have succumbed ideologically. We have succumbed intellectually. And hence we have succumbed spiritually too, in every possible way. It is time for us to creatively arise and transform ourselves in all areas and departments of our lives. The space of the university provides as much an arena as any for this rehabilitative, deconstructive, and reconstructive work. Boys are bread. C'est fini.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for enlightening us on educational racism, which fits into political and religious as well. And what are we going to, he's left us with a question, how are we going to integrate this into our curriculum? Not only that, but even at home, the socialization, because we teach our students to sing Humpty Dumpty Sat on the Wall instead of Baby Careful, you know. So how are we going to do that? On that note, I'd like to invite questions and comments from the audience. Okay.
So I want to say a big thank you once again to our esteemed speaker. And he touched on several points that really resonate with me. I will take it, I guess, from the educational sphere into the economic, socio-political sphere. It has been very obvious to, I don't know, to me at least, that democracy, Western style, doesn't work for us and for developing countries. And I keep, anytime I have meetings with people from the US Embassy, I tell them that your brand of democracy doesn't fit. We have our traditional authorities. We have our traditional system of governance. We have our rulers, our chiefs. Much as our chiefs these days have gone over to the dark side as well, you know. But I think that as individuals and as thought leaders, as scions, you know, of our very society, it rests on us now, you know, to make that step or to forge ahead into that new domain that works and that will show some results. We all look around us at the, you know, the field that is engulfing us, at the lack of infrastructure, etc. So how do we start? Where do we start from? I, for example, had some political aspirations, which I shelved because well, for now, which I've shelved. But do I go as an independent candidate? And if you're an independent candidate, you don't have the resources, like you said in one of your quotations. I think Patrice Lumumba was the one who didn't have the resources to help you or propel you to that level where you can actually make an impact. So what next? What do we do?
Mine is not a question, but a suggestion. Since we left this campus 25 years ago, I'm Louis Kwame Amu. Okay, let me stand up. Good. It is for the very reason I am actually making my point. Good. I am Louis Kwame Amu. I work at the Ministry of Finance. Thank you. Yes, since we left about 25 years ago, anyone who stands up just as I have done should be able to introduce himself. This forum is also for networking. We need to know ourselves. That's my suggestion. Thank you very much.
Should I?
Yes, I'll be with you. Please, if you want to suggest or ask a question, please mention your name and where you work. So we want to know you and come and see you for networking. Thank you very much. I'll let our chairperson say something.
Thank you very much. I'm Peter Kwadwo with the Economics Department, Lagos. I didn't want to speak, but having listened to I thought I should say something. You know, our democracy has issues, and I don't think the way we are going is really going to help us. It's become very expensive, so those with the brains, etc., are not the ones who are actually elected to lead sometimes, or most of the time. But I also want us to think of the counterfactual, that we had a period without democracy. We have a period with democracy. Let's look at our national development. look at key things. Were we better off in those times where you feared to speak, where you feared to come out? I mean, you look at several things and compare with the present and ask yourself whether we are better off or we are worse off. I think freedom, Amartya Sen will tell you, development in freedom. If you are free, I think you would sometimes prefer that to being caged, yet you have all the resources. So I think as we discuss this issue, I want us to look at it in this perspective. Thank you.
My apologies for hogging the mic. My name is Ama Bewa. I work for Newmont Mining Corporation. And I was talking about not having, or not having democracy, but having our brand of democracy. Because not having democracy at all, I think we all know what that feels like. But our brand, that fits our peculiar circumstances.
Would like to further solicit questions and comments.
Can I address some of the questions and then?
Oh, okay, right.
Because if it becomes too much, I'll probably forget some.
All right then. There are comments though, no questions. So that is why I haven't come back to you.
Okay, so
these are
okay.
The way forward. Oh, okay. You can address it now, Mr. Speaker.
No, I don't, Prof. I don't have the way forward.
Okay, can we ask the audience now because it's a discussion?
I have let me just make one or two comments on Ama's thing. You see, and Prof also said that the democratic era as it is better because maybe in the era of military coups and military regimes we were intimidated, had to sleep early, curfews, so that actually even stifled our creativity. But I'm not advocating that we return to that or a one-party state or anything. All I'm saying simply is that historically, we've been a people who have been great achievers. So why don't we begin to look at what we can take within our own system, within our own culture, that can be relevant for us and that can have checks and balances so that, it's not only, so for example, this whole country is full of so many people, but you realize that in terms of the control of the resources, it's just a tiny minority that continually, repeatedly has access to those resources, and those resources never really reach the nation people as such. So I think that we begin, so it's not a question of maybe jettisoning the system entirely, rejecting it entirely, but looking at how it can be made and ensured, transforming and ensure that everybody benefits. I mean, I personally will never accept the fact that we are so resource rich, yet we are so poor, and then all kinds of excuses come up, and we keep doing the same old things that we do. Look up to the West, go up to the IMF, borrow money, do this and that. If all of these things have not worked for us over the years, why are we still doing that? And then also, when are we going to, as a people, say, look, okay, we don't want any of this. We have these resources. Even if we've not done well and people are calling us third world, underdeveloped up to this point in time, when can we now begin to say, okay, we don't want your companies or whatever to come and take so much from us and then just give us royalties. We want to be owned. We want to own this. So I think we need to begin to look at questions of ownership and how it's done so that largely, generally, a majority of the people will be. And if you go deep into our cultural and political systems, and I only said I don't have the way because I don't like to think that I have the solution to everything or whatever. There's a way in which we can sit down and ensure that, look, what do you think will happen, for example, if one day the Ghanaian electorate or the African electorate decided that we are not going to vote for this or that party? What do you think will happen? Just imagine. But now we are very partisan. We are very divided. We are either this or that. What do you think will happen if Ghanaians collectively say, look, yeah, Bremo, because you come and go, and it's the same thing. I mean, growing up, the Ghana that I was in when I was in, kindergarten, secondary school, etc., it looks like it's worse now in terms of certain things, sports, this, that. But why should that be the case? And the problem that we've had is that we're so partisan that if it's our government or the government that we prefer in power, whether what they're doing is good or not, we'll support it, etc. We need to begin to look at models of teaching, etc., that forget that part bipartisan. Because what Western democracy also does is that it thrives on that bipartisanism. And you see, the US of A, Britain, England, whatever, all those other people that we claim to be, and we cite them so much, said in other jurisdictions. Look, it doesn't. Those people do not have our interests at heart. So we need to begin to see how we can weave our way out of that entangled space and begin to think and free ourselves and begin to say, look, off us, leave us to think freely and create. And we can come up with a system. When human beings are free to think, have the basics in terms of food, health, shelter, whatever, they will come up with something. So I think one of the reasons why I actually raised this thing about democracy is that I've seen that we've almost come to the psychological mindset that, listen, this democracy thing, that's it, and there's no other way forward. So anybody that questions it, you're living an illusion or something like that. But that's not the thing. Even that, which is not working for us, has to be thrown away, has to be questioned, has to be reviewed. That's one of the things that I'd like to say.
Thank you very much. Madam Millicent, your hand was up earlier.
Hi, my name is Millicent Boo. I think what I want to say is we need to start from from the beginning in terms of how we educate our children. Like, I know you were talking about people in kindergartens and nursery schools and stuff like that. Even as we grow, I haven't lived here for a very long time, but every time I come, it's like everybody thinks it's better to live outside than to live here. And even when I tried, I had an incident last week. I was traveling and I was in a rest stop, and this Chinese guy came over and he was standing behind me and he didn't see me, or he just saw me as a black person. So he probably thought that I was one of the locals, and he tried to push me, and I turned around and I started engaging with him and everything. Unfortunately for me, my own people, like my own Ghanaians, were trying to side with him and be on his side, why are you questioning Obroni and all of those things? And I was trying to tell them that, he's not Obroni, he's not better than you and I, but I think it has to start with the way we think of ourselves and who we are. That would, as we rise through our educational system, I think that would help a lot. Just knowing who we are as a people and not rejecting the things that we have and not looking out and thinking that everything that is outside of our country or what we know is better than what we have. It has to start from our educational system, even like basic education. I think that would help a lot.
That's a conversation that I had with Neil Motagbe yesterday. The point is that we've been primed. Listen, when I'm coming to Ghana, I see a white man who's walking through Kotoka with his trolley, and obviously you can see that he's here for the first time. Right. They let him go and then they stop him. Yeah. And then I say, look, okay, it's okay for you to do your job and to stop me. Right. I don't mind, but why do you let this person go through? Right. So we have that subservient, servile attitude. And let me tell you something, what you experience with the Chinese is the same thing in the kindergarten, and it's the same thing that happens at the political level, even when we go to negotiate, because already we're seeing them as superior. So so we have to begin to break that down, as you say, at that level, so that we see that we are free people who can, engage freely.
My name is Edwin Gaffrey, and addressing the way forward. So my thoughts are that until we are able to adopt a system that is sustainable, we can have a YKP party, PKP party. The cycle will be the same. We need to have a system that is sustainable. And how do we do that? Education. Education that is relevant. Not O-level, they ask you to label, draw a frog and label it. What relevance has that got to do with our development? Or A-level, we are studying Great Lakes. What relevance has that got to do with a child somewhere? So until we develop a curriculum that is helpful to our needs and sustainable, we'll be back to the same cycle.
Well, Prof, thanks very much for your lecture. My name is Mike Obla. I'm an investment banker, and I work for a company called Synergy. I think that academia has a lot of role to play in the way forward. We sit in this country and we allow a few politicians to direct the course of our lives. Look at what is happening to the educational system today. I mean, we all sat here and the government told us about free education. And people kept asking, how are you going to finance this? How are you going to finance this? And they gave a very simplified answer. and said there's NDC created a lot of waste, and that the savings that they are going to make from stopping the waste is what they will use to finance this, without anybody putting pen to paper to it. And we have investors in this country. Nobody challenged the thought. Today, look at where we are. All the resources that we have been channeled into the free education. And nothing seems to be happening. I've read some research papers this morning saying that since January to date, our country is static. Nothing is happening. You know, and now we're going to think about a dual system. What I'm trying to drive at is that when I was doing my MBA in the UK, and the UK was trying to change whether they should join the EU or not to join, and whether they should go use the EU currency or maintain the pound. It was a constant debate at the universities. At the lecture halls, that was what was being discussed. And the universities came up with position papers on the subject. So a lot of intellectual discussions went into it. But we are so polar, even at the university level, and because we have NDC, MPP, NDC, and everybody becomes political, somebody will come up with a very good paper on a subject and people go against it. So I think that from all that you have said so far, that discourse must start from academia. And we must put our voices out there, not just academia, but even our research institutions, to put things out there, well-researched, well thought through, with figures and scientific stuff to back it. As you speak, you had all your books with you demonstrating how far you've read and how you've managed to put all this together. I think that we must begin to do that. And we must change the dialogue, because the politicians will not change this country. And like someone said, it will get to a point, in fact, actually you said it, that what happens if voters decide not to vote? We are going to get there one day. Because we've seen NDC, we've seen NPP, and it's the same thing. It is like the same play with different cast. We are just recycling people. It's going to get to a time that you and I, we are driving on our roads and people will be hitting our roads. Look at what is going on in Kigali. It's an African country. But look at what is happening. But yet, because they had good leadership, even America supported the extension of their presidential term. We must evolve something for ourselves. Otherwise, something will happen in this country.
Hello. Hello. My name is Emilia Safo. I'm the head of HR at Town Palace Hotel. And I've worked with Chinese for some time. And what I've studied and learned from them is that they are very hardworking. Their attitude to work is positive. They don't show off, they sacrifice, which are different from most of our Ghanaian counterparts. So sometimes it's the attitude to work. You know, a lot more people in Ghana, we don't sacrifice. Maybe when it's 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, you just pick your bag and you are out. All these things are contributing to our lacking behind. So maybe if we are able to change this kind of attitude to work and bring it to a positive side, we will develop to some point.
I just thought I should respond to the investor banker because he mentioned academia, and I don't know whether he meant we're not doing anything. We've said a lot about free SHS, and in fact, if you Google most of the newspapers, you will see academia actively advising government on the way to go. Even last week, before the mid-year review, we invite Joy FM came to pitch here, the next room, the first room over there. We had about 2 hours of engagement. We spoke about free SHS and all the things we want to hear about. We've spoken about targeting, that yes, the policy is good, but there is a need to target, that the funding is not sustainable, and there is a need to target. And I even posed the question, why pay my child's school fees? I'd rather prefer you buy an ambulance or buy a hospital bed, because I can't buy an ambulance and the ambulance follows me everywhere I go. I cannot carry my hospital bed when I'm ill to the hospital, but I can pay my child's school fees. Oftentimes when we talk about targeting, we throw our hands in the air, that we can't do it. We don't know where the poor are. But let me tell you, LEAP has 230,000 beneficiaries. It's one of the most targeted, best, well-targeted programs Ghana has ever had. Free SHS, those who went to Form 1, how many? About 400,000. Why can't we scale it up? Is it so hard to do? So I think we should go back. And I was yesterday, in fact, I was the most happiest man when I heard the finance minister say, let those who can pay. Let's start the debate. Because I think that's the way to go. Thank you very much.
So it's me again, no? I'm sorry, but I'm really passionate about this issue. I want to suggest that UG93, I think we are a unique year group. We have started something that other year groups haven't started. And when I look at the leadership that we have amongst us, I mean, we have politicians, I see Koku, I see Honorable Amiacheme here. We have governors, 3 or 4 Bank of Ghana governors. We have economists, we have politicians, we have bankers. So I want to suggest that let's not let this society that we have started fall apart. Can we use UG93 to effect some change? We can start here. So I want to suggest that, and I'm really happy to see the attendance today. Let's roll out that information and get more people here, so that if it's monthly or bi-monthly, let's meet. Let's, put our heads together. Between now and when is the next election, 2020, we can actually set ourselves a target to make an impact. Communication, let's get out there. We have several radio stations and several, talk shows that we can appear on and start the conversation, so that it gets to a point where forget NDC, forget MPP. It's about Ghana and it's about us. And individually, we can either effect some kind of social change or get the independent candidates into Parliament to a point where we have the critical numbers to make a difference. So I think that UG93 is a great platform for us to start doing something about this, dilemma we find ourselves in.
Mr. Speaker, would you like to some of the comments that have been made quickly?
Okay. I'd just like to make a general comment about the education bit. I think that, this paper is about the university as a space for creative and transformational education, but I also think that we can do the education at all levels of society, and that it doesn't, because not everybody has access to the university classroom for whatever reason. Some people don't even want to be, so, but then we are all part of the society and we are all linked one way or the other. So I think that in our various areas of engagement, work, life, we can have that education. And, sometimes the education also has been calcified. It's almost like all knowledge is in the book, but we have so many different areas and sources from which we can gather knowledge. A lot of it is even in our music, a lot of it is in our traditional creative arts and things like that. And that is why, for example, the creative arts is a very important arena, because if you look at the way in which, look, Ghanaians are watching this, what is it, Kunkumbagia, or what is it, Spanish telenovelas. That thing, it's counterproductive to our development as a people, because already the children are beginning to see beauty as that kind of long hair. They're beginning, they all want to wear Peruvian, Brazilian wigs. Imagine what it would be like if we were highlighting and showing programs where we had the afro, the rasta, the twist, etc. Psychologically, the young ones growing up are going to pick all of that. So I'm saying that we must find a way of making an intervention. And I always have to clarify and make the point that we are not against borrowing from foreign cultures or civilizations, but we must center ourselves within ourselves first and then project to the world. Other than that, we always following somebody and then we are confused, and no wonder then we are in the situation in which we are. So I think that if we can all make it a kind of effort to ensure that wherever we are, we learn more about ourselves and share what we learn about ourselves, ultimately, automatically, we generate a society that has more self-belief in itself. And any people that has self-belief now begins to be very creative, very productive. And if you look at it, like I said yesterday on the XYZ station, Ghanaians are a very creative, and then I'll differ slightly with my my colleague here who talked about how the Chinese are hardworking and the Ghanaians. I believe that we are also really very hardworking and creative in our own way, but it depends on how it is channeled, how we are made to look at even the notion of work and the rewards of work. And all of it doesn't have to be office suit, tie, or corporate this and that. We must reward even other areas of work where people are making an impact in society. Because people make an impact. I mean, look at these market women that wake up 3 a.m., 4 a.m., go to Makola or Agbogblosi or whatever. Listen, they are the best economists, not the person we wear suit way from Washington. They come talk big grammar, they come show us. Because all they've come with so far, it hasn't worked. Abi, IMF, it has come and come and come, it hasn't worked. So we have to begin to learn to even validate and value things within our local environment and our economy and project that and share knowledge as much as possible. And I think that will go somewhere as a people.
Thank you very much. Before I give it to the chairman of this occasion and the founder, let me just say something in relation to what Bole said. When it comes to work ethics, hard work ethics, and then the fact that foreign models that we have used has not worked, it's also has to do with us, our own attitudes, our culture that is embedded in us. We need to get rid of them, and that is where the creative aspect of integrating it in academia, teaching us, learning how to decolonize our minds when it comes to issues like that. Because we always say, oh, this system doesn't work. But are you not part of the system that is not working? So we need to come together as one to be able to challenge the status quo to make it work. Now, I'll give it to the founder, Mr. Coleman.
AKA Apeletu.
Yes, Prof, thank you for...
University of Ghana alumni 1993. Casely Atu Coleman. All right.
I'm a Langa from Awishi. Anyway, I'm a fellow of Imani. Prof, thanks for your lecture. I think this question goes to Prof. Korte and also Mr. Beidou. I like the bit about Africanizing the content and the curriculum of our university, because I think the examples that you raised touch values and excellence. So I don't know if there are reflections in the university around looking at the current business model of the university and how to inculcate some of these ideas. That's my question.
I think you're very much right. I wanted to reserve part of this brief closing remarks. Yes, we realize that a lot of the things we teach, the curriculum, is devoid of our local content, local materials. One, not due to our own doing, but most of the things are not online. Look, if a student wants to research in anything, he goes online, he Googles, or he or she Googles, you get so much of Western materials. Ask yourself, how many of our local materials are even online for you to access? You saw Bole's book that he showed. They were all ripped in tatters. I mean, to what extent can we circulate that book? It tells you we used to hard copies and less of electronic copies. So the West is always ahead of us. But a few years ago, the university realized this and then asked every unit or department to produce a reader. So we have the reader in economics, reader in history, reader in business school. All the readers came out, quite a number of them came out. That ensured that local content are in those materials, and they are online, they are available everywhere. So lecturers are supposed to introduce that on their course outline and several other things that are happening. So we are working on it. Maybe Mr. Beidou would add to that. I've said it all.
My name is Kwadwo Osei Nyame Jnr. I'm a servant of Ghana.
Also nicknamed Joe Willie.
I just want to make two interventions. I'm looking at how we utilize opportunities to impact on wider society. It seems that our society is gearing towards myself, my family, without thinking about what impact I can make on the wider society. So from the university, our students need to be, conscientized, sensitized, going into the wider society. What can you do to impact on this? It's very critical. The other thing is about the choice of leaders who make policies and others for us. I've engaged with a lot of current MPs, and I must be frank with you, I become sad when you engage with them in a discourse. They are not able to think through, outside the box. There are few people who are ready to go there. I was just discussing with Pato that people just gather some few cities, go around, pay people, and they are chosen as parliamentary candidates. They vote for them. They go and they cannot make any headway out of what they do. So then the only thing they are interested in, we call honorable, they get their V8, they go around, and they are not actually, discussing issues that will impact on society. They are not thinking deep enough. I've worked in the governance sector, and I know what I'm talking about. I think it's high time, and I want to side with Amma, that our group should actually work to find out something that will impact, that will feed into policy making, governance, and other things that will impact on society. I think if we do that, it will help Ghana. Because seriously, what is happening there? I went on a radio program with about 2 MPs, and when we were discussing, I became so sad. They made some comments. The statement that they made, actually, I became sad. As I sat in my car, oh, where are we heading towards? That you sit in parliament, you call yourself an honorable, and you make that statement without any facts, no analysis, and just, a straight statement. So we let us, engage more and fashion out ways we can also impact. Go there, and some of us we are ready to launch a revolution. Oh yes, oh yes. Find ways.
Can I?
Yeah, yes. No, using creativity to impact is revolution. Revolution is a change of mind. A change of mind, a change of attitude is a revolution. That is it. That is what not what people perceive Pato to have it said. The last So I think that's my intervention. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Michael Asari, a service personnel at College of Basic and Applied Sciences. I'm quite shifting from what has been discussed so far to the issue of the African narrative.
Yeah.
The little I know suggests that Africans don't really tell our story. Mm-hmm. That is why mostly we don't have the content that we seek on the internet. Mm-hmm. That is why we don't have most of the materials that are, stories, novels, and articles. We don't really have them in stock for us to research and read more into. Mm. So could it be that based on your presentation and then your assertion that the Europeans have been suppressing achievers? Anybody who rises, any great achiever from our continent who rises is quite suppressed in a way. So could it be that the fear of the suppression has restricted us to tell our story? Because we have, great people doing great things, but, we can actually know them in person. You don't see them writing anything, telling us what they are into, what they've observed, and, nothing like that. So could it be because of the fear of being suppressed?
I think.
Thank you.
Okay. There are several sides. There are several sides to that issue. One of them is that We have, this one was published in 1958 because he was in the university and they were teaching about Africa, and they were teaching novels like Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, or Mr. Johnson by Joyce Carey, or King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider Haggard, and all those books were novels that were depicting Africans as savage and exotic, uncivilized, etc. So he decided that he was going to write a story about Nigeria, the Igbo, which became representative of Nigeria and Africa. So I mean, it became a text that is used for, if you like, decolonizing, literature. You have people like Ngugi Thiong'o, who wrote Weep Not Child, The River Between in Kenya, who did the same thing that is done here. Prior to this, you had Kingsley Hayford with Ethiopian Bound in 1911, which is a bigger novel even than this one, narrative, which is talking about African philosophy. You have Kobna Sechi with The Blinkards in 1938, etc. So we have a lot of narratives. One of the things that is happening is that we haven't been including these in our curricula. You understand? So one of the things that when you go deep into our history, you realize that a lot has been done. But back to the point, there's so much more that we can do. And it's true that we don't really tell our stories. And part of the reason why we don't tell our stories is that we are inundated with images of foreignness and foreign culture and how beautiful, etc. it is. And there's a process of erasure by substitution. The more we delve into the foreign cultures, which I keep on saying is not that we are too completely antithetical to, the less we see about ourselves. So we have to then be the ones that make the conscious effort to center our narratives as part of our university curriculum, kindergarten curriculum. I mean, what stops us beginning to sing about, like she was saying, baby kafun boromete, or tu boromi, or singing rhymes that includes people like, Tete Kwashi, or, Ephraim Amu, etc., instead of singing about Jack and Jill. If you have a whole generation that comes up with that kind of thing in the educational system, they're learning about Ghanaian, African heroes, etc. By the time they are 20, 30 years, when they are sitting down with Oboni or Igbo, they are not scared. And when Oboni wants to use some intricacy, bukata way to tell them about some IMF policy or something, whatever they know doesn't work, they'll kind of say, no, we want to approach it from this way because we are immersed in ourselves in an environment and we can negotiate, and we don't want you to come and give us what you're giving us. So it's also because we are our whole process of education, we are so alienated. So we have to now cease, and nothing is stopping us telling our own stories. I mean, I could have come here typically from London School of Oriental African Studies. I could have come here and given this lecture, talked about the university as a space of private, creative and transformational education, and I could have cited some big Western authors and talked about how this shows that there's an advanced theory about this. And then maybe I would have gotten away with it. But you can see that the whole thing is that kind of counter-penetrative practice where I'm seeking to say that we have things, our own narratives, our own stories that we can tell, and that we should tell them more. And it's hard in the sense that sometimes we don't have the information, but the information is also out there in our history, and we have to dig and retrieve. But then at the same time also we have to encourage ourselves to create more narratives about ourselves, even in the present era. Tell the stories of the things that are really happening. And oftentimes, there's too much within our culture. Charlie, this thing is not working for me. Okay, there's too much within our culture. Oh, okay, I'll just wind up quick. There's too much within our culture where even when knowledge is coming down to us into our school system, it's all through some, Ministry of Education, some official policy, whatever. But then sometimes the people that sit down, just like Joe Willie was saying, there are people who don't know what they're talking about as, parliamentarians or something. There are people who are designing curricula at the highest level who don't have an idea what it is that is relevant to us and all of those things. But we don't have any avenue for questioning that. I think I'll stop at this point.
Oh, okay, thank you. My name is Kwesi Nyame Jnr, a politician. I'm the Member of Parliament for Sunyani East and the Majority Chief Whip in Parliament. It's good sometimes to listen as a politician, so I have listened, and my brother Patu has also listened. I think the platform created for us today is a very good one. Our brother has researched very well into the topic that was assigned to him. My suggestion is that probably we create or we institutionalize it every 3 months, every quarter, every 6 months, or yearly. We'll have a lecture of the sort. It could be on politics, it could be on chieftaincy, it could be on the economy of Ghana or governance, so that we get one of our own to come and deliver a lecture to us. Appeal to and all those people are around to help us, so that we get informed. Those of us in leadership positions, we learn when we have such interactions. I think that I've not wasted my time for being here. I've learned a lot, and I'm being guided also as a politician. But don't make us an endangered species. I agree with most of the things, but I think that for every society, you can have the menses. So you have a body of 275 House members of Parliament, and you think everybody must conform. No, it can never happen. You will get some people, the errant ones. Some of us, even in leadership, sometimes we go wrong. And what is important is to be humbled enough to take criticisms that are constructive, you conform, and we move on. Thank you so much.
Patu, say something. Patu, say something.
Right.
Say something.
Okay.
Okay, I just wanted about 30 seconds to acknowledge my old schoolmates from Achimota. I see some of them here, JC Wansa, I see Frederick Quason, Abotawa, who's seated right here. I also belong to a forum called Paddy's, which is come out of people that have gone to Motown. So all the Accra people who are here, Abotawa and co, and also the Lagos 93 people, I see Segze, I see Pato. We intersect in so many ways. And I want to, I'm saying that one group, like I'm a member of Motown and then I'm a member of UG93. Sometimes you have somebody who is both in Motown and UG93. Typical example being Pato. That's what I mean. So I just wanted to acknowledge all these people and thank you for your presence today.
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite the chairperson for his closing remarks.
Please take your seat. Well, yes, keynote speaker, having thanked everybody, let me also thank you for such a wonderful delivery. It's been interesting, thought-provoking. I hope you would do something with this and get it in a better shape. No, the topic has been quite interesting. Just a quick one before I give 1 or 2 points and then we get out of here. Been talking about Baby Careful and all the nice songs, we sing for our children. One day I was traveling and I met a Chinese. The Chinese like fast things. There was a lady also, cajoling the baby, and hers was chen chen chen. It was chen chen chen. So they have their version. That's just by the way. I think the points you have raised are quite relevant. I recall training in the UK. Anytime we treated a topic, oligopoly, monopoly, whatever, then at the end, they say application. Every topic, the lecturer will tell you application. Then we'll pick a short industry, we'll pick an industry, and apply the economic theory we have learnt. Then you come to our own setting. I studied accounting at the A level, and we have Frank Wood, those of you who studied accounting. The examples, lighting and heating. They mentioned chimney. I mean, that's how abstract it is, Yet we were forced to study them. You see, and I think it's about time we try to transform our curriculum so that we use real examples. I mean, this is the accountant. He knows what I'm talking about. He didn't even understand what chimney meant, but he was, So I think it's very important we do that. I also want to throw this. I want us to be sometimes a bit more positive, have a positive outlook about our country, our economy. I don't think we are stagnating. We have moved on, but we think we could have gone further than we are. Now, the fishmonger, by the sea or whatever has a mobile phone. In the past, if you wanted to travel to the north, it took you about 11 hours or 3 days, sometimes 3 days. Now you could do that, you could fly. I think there are some positives that we can record. And I think, yes, I think we should also highlight. So sometimes when we send this negative, too much of it, it doesn't motivate creativity, it doesn't encourage people. So I think we should be mindful of that. Lastly, the point about our graduates impacting knowledge, I think is very relevant, and we are trying to do that here. Most people go through all kinds of courses. We have entrepreneurship being taught around. The challenge they face is when they are done, it becomes difficult for them to set up their own businesses. And last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, I was interacting with the finance minister on the media, and their point was, we shouldn't expect government to come and do things for us. They should be able to raise capital. And I said, no, there are some who struggle to pay their fees. So those are the ones, there are some who are able to raise capital and get into business, but there are quite a number who struggle to even complete. And those ones, they are counting on government to provide some seed capital. So yes, they are certainly doing something to encourage entrepreneurship. Lastly, about the way forward, I think Honorable mentioned the need to institutionalize this. I support that fully. I think after every lecture, we should draft a policy brief. The policy brief can be 2 or 3 pages, straight to the point about the key issues. Then we can circulate. Why is Kwaku sandwich between 2 ladies? So we can circulate this. We can disseminate these kinds of information. I think we are doing the right thing. I thank all of you for this.
On that note, I'd like to thank everyone who came here to participate in the public lecture. It's been very fruitful and exciting. We have refreshment in the next room,